Hello YouTube chess lovers and my friends, this is Gunjan here. Welcome to the 6th episode of my Lowenthal Sicilian Repertoire from the black perspective. In this episode, we are going to look at the move 8 Queen to C7 by white, which arises after the following move order: E4, C5, Knight to F3, Knight to C6, D4, C captures D4, Knight captures D4, E5, Knight to B5, and after A6, we invite this knight on a juicy D6 square with a check, and then we exchange with the bishop and challenge the white queen with Queen to F6. And now white continue with Queen to C7, keeping his queen right into black guards. Personally, I think Queen to C7 is not a dangerous move. The simple reason is, now you can see the C2 pawn is unguarded, and in many variations we are going to target that pawn and get our free piece development. Okay, here our first universal move, knight G to E7. An idea is very simple. We want to play D5 if it is allowed by the white camp. Well, 99% of the game continue with knight to C3, which stopped the move D5. However, you should also note that in some games white has played the move C4, but as the C2 square is more weak after knight to D4, white is having a huge problem in all the games. So let's continue with the obvious move, knight to C3, controlling the D5 square. And as I mentioned earlier, here comes the first important memory marker, guys. Remember, against Queen to C7, you are going to play this thematic attacking move, Knight to B4. And by doing so, black has two threats. Number one, there is a fork on C2 looming. And the second obvious threat is, yup, we want to play D5 and free up our all-piece play. Well, obviously white has only one decent move in this position, namely bishop to D3. However, few games in the database continue with knight to A4, which is not a right continuation, and the simple refutation goes as follows: B5, attacking the knight, knight to B6, attacking the black rook. So white is going for the tactical battle, which I don't think so is right option, as black goes for this simple sequence, knight captures C2 check. If queen takes C2, then queen captures B6 and black is a clear pawn up. So that's not the choice. White has to play king to D1. And after that, yup, we are going to capture the rook in the corner, which allows also white to grab the rook in the corner. But now it's black turn, and black has this wonderful move in the picture, namely Queen captures F2, and after the whole transaction, it turns out that not only black come up with a clear pawn advantage, but there are some devastating threats are looming, which is not healthy for the white camp. You can check out this position in any professional engine and it will tell you a good amount of advantage to the black camp. Okay, bishop to D3, what else? And again, the one important thing I like to highlight in this variation is, you will never take on D3 unless and until white force you to do it. Our knight is very superiorly placed and is always looking to the C2 square, so white is never going to move this bishop in near future. After bishop to D3, we are going to continue with our thematic break D5. And if you can achieve this break in any of the white variation, black is instantly better in almost all the lines. Now, as per the arrows, I have shown the most popular choice by white, and amongst them, castle is the main line. However, let's start with other moves first. The first move I want to consider is E captures D5, which is a pretty bad choice by the white camp. The simple reason is, after the few captures, let's say knight captures D5, knight captures D5, knight captures D5, attacking the queen. Queen has the only logical square, namely queen to C5, which stops black castling. But not to worry. After this move, black get a very free piece play. So for example, a sample line can goes like this: bishop to e6, planning to play rook to c8, and after castle on the king side, black indeed continue with rook to c8. And if white still want to stop the castle, then he has to play queen to a3. But after black's next reply, queen to e7, I think black is already in the driver's seat. The simple reason is, after queen captures e7 and king captures e7, look at the number of pieces black has developed, and he has a very simple plan to execute, namely h rook goes to the d file, and if allowed, then knight will also jump to the juicy b4 square. All in all, I think this position is quite pleasant for the black, and with some careful analysis, you have all the winning chances in the tournament practice. For your reference, I have attached a model game in the PGN, so don't forget to watch it. The second move I want to consider is bishop to d2. And here comes the second important memory marker, guys. Apart from e captures d5, if your opponent responds with any other moves, then we are going to continue with d4. Not only grab the space on the queen side, but meanwhile we are also attacking the white knight, and white has very limited options. There are two genuine tries by white, and let's see each by turn. The first move I want to consider is knight to e2. And as now white unleashed the attack on the b4 knight, we have to capture on d3, and after pawn captures d3, we are going to continue with knight to c6, giving protection to the e5 square, so our queen can counterattack the white queen. Okay, white castle on the king side, we are going to castle on the king side, and now in almost all the games, white continue with this thematic break f4, challenging the black center. Well, if you are playing against a higher seed and if you want a safe game, then my recommendation is you should continue with queen to d8, which force the queen exchange, and resulting position is quite equalish for the black cam, and you can check out my analysis in the PGN. However, we are looking at some aggressive and attacking options in this line, and that's why my own recommendation in this position is you should continue with this tactical move, bishop to g4. As the white knight get attacked, the most popular choice is knight to g3. But here comes my own invention, guys. There is a nice little trap exists in this line, which start with rook to c8, attacking the queen. Queen has to go to the b6 square, because if white continue with queen captures b7, then he rightly fall into our trap, as after the move rook c to b8, that queen is more or less trapped, and she has only one square to go, queen to c7. Afterwards, rook to a7, trap the sweetie forever. You might ask, hang on, but what about if white counterattack your queen? Well, then the case is very simple. We are going to first take the rook, and after rook takes and the move rook captures c7, black emerge with the whole rook up. So that's the nasty line if your opponent become greedy. The more general response is queen to b6. And against this, I am also going to show you one of the very tricky move, starting with e captures f4. So at first sight, it looks like after rook to f4, attacking two spots, so black response is forced. Black has to play queen to e6. And if you carefully look at this position, after the move h3, black lights her bishop as a complete goner, as he doesn't have any space to run. But believe it or not, this is exactly black wants, as we have cooked up this nice little surprise, starting with knight to e5. So if white take the queen, then we'll take back with the bishop, and our bishop is no longer in the trouble. If queen captures d4, then rook to d8 is a very strong reply. So considering all these options, white shouldn't go for the tactical ideas, and he can calmly retrieve the queen back to a5 and asking black, hey, now what? Isn't that bishop as a goner? Well, yes, indeed, that's true, except we are going to sacrifice in a style with bishop captures h3, pawn captures h3, and now queen captures h3. If queen captures e5, then queen captures g3 is a very strong reply. So accordingly, white has the only move in this position, namely knight to f5, which in fact creating two deadly threats. Okay, for the time being, we have to defend this, so rook to e8 is obvious choice. And now you can see the obvious threat, knight to f3, and white is in a huge trouble. In fact, there is a game in the database, continue with rook to f2. But after black's obvious response, knight to f3, white is obliged to capture this knight. And when black recapture, you can see the problem in the white camp now. Yes, indeed, he has two pieces for a rook and a two pawn, but I think these three connected pass pawns are too much strong in the endgame, and indeed, later on, black managed to win the game. So this is one of the great attacking line which you can use in the tournament practice with a great surprise value. The second move I want to consider is knight to a4. And against this, here comes the third important memory marker. Whenever your opponent plays knight to a4 in this line, the move you have to remember is queen to c6, attacking two spots. So white response is force, white has to exchange the queen, and then we are going to recapture it with our e-knight, protecting our brother. Okay, knight to b6, attacking two spot. No problem, we are going to continue with rook to b8. And now it doesn't matter whether white continue with castle or f4. Let's say most frequent choice here is castle on the king side, black castle on the king side, and now once again this thematic break f4. So at first sight this position looks so good for the white, as he is not undermining our center, but he also has a bishop pair and our pieces looks bit cramped. Well, that's the current situation, but it can be changed drastically after few moves with knight captures d3, pawn captures d3, and now the star move in this position, f5, and with this move, black confirms his slight advantage in this position. In fact, in the database, there are only 2 games played from this position, and in both the games, white continue with the critical response, f captures e5. So idea is very simple, black cannot recapture, as after bishop to f4, black has a lost position. But never mind, black is not in a hurry, and he can calmly continue with bishop to e6. If knight to d5, then bishop captures d5, and I have attached a sample analysis in the PGN. So again, the most critical response is bishop to f4, protecting the e5 pawn. So far white is having all the fun, and now it's black's turn. So the first obvious move which we are going to play is f captures e4, which gives white this horrible pawn. And now very sneaky idea, rook to f7. And believe it or not, this move creates a deadly threat of capturing a a2 pawn. So for example, a casual white player can continue with h3, and after that we can by force get the a2 pawn with the following sequence: rook to f8, attacking the bishop, and once the bishop moves, we can exchange the rook on the f1 square and then grab this loose pawn on a2, which gives a comfortable winning advantage to the black camp. So obviously white has to stop it, and it doesn't matter whether he continue with a3 or b3. Let's say one of the game continue with b3 and black continue with his obvious plan rook to f8. After bishop to g3, all the rooks disappear from the board, and the net result is after the move knight to b4, we are again getting that loose a2 pawn. If a3, then knight to c2 is a very strong reply. But some of you may ask, okay, white can lose on a2, but on the counterpart, white can grab the loose d4 pawn, right? Well, yes, that's true, but see yourself, as after king to e2, knight captures a2, king to d3, black again has this nice move in the picture, namely knight to c1 check. The point is, after king captures d4 and the move knight captures b3, suddenly black get two distant passer, and with some careful and accurate play, you can definitely convert this position into the winning advantage. Your engine might say this position is equal, but as per the human perspective and in the tournament pressure, this position can only favor the black camp. I have attached rest of the game in the PGN where slowly black converted his full point. So finally we are reaching the main line with castle on the king side. And you know the plan, right? Yup, we are going to get the space on the queen side with d4 attacking the knight. And white knight has again two squares to go. Amongst them, the easiest one is knight to a4, which we are going to meet with our third important memory marker, queen to c6, exchanging the queen. And then after knight to b6, rook to b8, white has two choices. If your opponent continue here with the move f4, which in fact the only independent move in this position, then my suggestion is you should respond with f6. And the resulting position is quite okay for the black camp. You can check out a model game in the PGN which can highlight the plan of campaign from the black side. However, the most popular choice in this position is to play bishop to d2, which in fact directly transposes to our last variation, which goes as follows. Knight captures d3, pawn captures d3, castle on the king side, and after the move f4, do you remember? Yup, it's f5 and we reach to the exact same position. So now comes the last option, knight to e2, and against this, more or less, we have the same plan of campaign. Castle on the king side, f4, and if you recall, in bishop to d2 variation, we play this aggressive move bishop to g4, which is in fact we are going to also play in this variation. At the moment, black has a simple threat, namely knight captures d3 and then bishop captures e2, something which white has to address immediately. Again, the move knight to g3 is not good, as after the move rook to c8, black attacking two soft spots, and unfortunately white cannot defend both of them. Queen captures b7 is very risky for the white camp, so the accurate response is queen captures e5. But after that, we can go for this simple sequence, queen captures e5, f captures e5, knight to c2 attacking the rook, and after bishop captures c2, rook captures c2, with the naked eye, you can easily see that not only black has tremendous piece activity, but white has this horrible pawn structure at the center of the board, which gives black ample opportunity to play for the devastating attack. So considering knight to g3 is not working, more or less white has the only good response in this position, namely f captures e5. And against this, my recommendation is you go for this very tactical line, starting with queen to c6. White has two options. If he continue with queen captures e7, then after knight captures d3, the e2 knight is hanging, and the logical response, knight captures d4, completely fails due to the simple move, queen captures e4. So with undeveloped piece, going for the tactics is not a good idea by the white camp. So the natural response is queen captures c6. Afterwards, we are going to continue with capturing with e-knight. Again, our threat remains as it is, and accordingly, white has to move the knight. So knight to f4 is a logical response. But after that, we can get our pawn back with knight captures e5. Now to illustrate the danger in this position, I like to show you one of the high rank game where white continue with bishop to d2, attacking the knight, and black continue with the obvious sequence, knight captures d3, pawn captures d3, and rook to c8, grabbing the open c file. Well, white doesn't like it, so he challenges it, but there comes a very nice move. Rook captures c1, rook captures c1, and now comes the star move, g5. Well, white goes for the tactics with knight to d5, but this can easily diffuse by the simple move in the world, f6. And now, how are you going to save the d3 pawn? In fact, you can't, and correctly, white continue with the aggressive response, rook to c7, counter-attacking the b7 pawn. Well, again, black response is very nice, rook to f7, challenging the rook. And after the move knight to e7, he calmly continued with king to g7. So now indeed d3 pawn is hanging. So white thought, okay, no issues, I am going to get the b7 pawn. And after the move knight captures d3, suddenly he realized that, oops, my knight is pinned and king is coming on f8 with trapping down that knight. So he continued with bishop to a5, which has an idea to defend with bishop to d8. But what he missed is, after king to f8, bishop to d8 and the move king to e8, white indeed lose the piece and the game. That's it guys. With this detailed analysis, now you are confident enough to meet the move 8 queen to c7. Remember this very simple idea by black camp that after knight to e7, knight to c3, we have this lethal move knight to b4, which allow black to free up his game with the move d5, and in almost all the lines, black get a perfectly reasonable game. Well, thank you for watching this video. Feel free to like, subscribe and comment, and I'll meet you in my next episode very soon. Bye and take care.